All right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Jose Araya, and I am the Learner Engagement Manager at the AAMC. I'm really excited for this inaugural session of mock interviews with real admissions officers during our virtual medical school fair. We have some admissions staff as well as medical students that will be joining us to do the mock interviews and offer feedback and great tips to help you in your process. So I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, starting with, starting with Dr. Rose.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. David Rose. I'm the Associate Dean for Student Affairs and Admissions at Howard University College of Medicine, located in Washington, D.C. Our pronouns are he and him.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Klaus. I'm the Director of Admissions at the Washington State University Elson S. Floyd College of Medicine, and I use pronouns he, him.
Hi, I'm Celia Williams-Folks. I'm the Admissions Director at Howard University. My pronouns are she, her.
We could have Whitney.
Sorry, I'm maybe the last one. My name is Whitney Stewart. I am a 7th year MD PhD student at Southwestern in Dallas, Texas. And my pronouns are she, her.
And Rosa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Rosa Frias, and I am a rising PGY1 at University of Miami, Jackson Health. I am finishing up my 4th year at San Juan Bautista School of Medicine in Puerto Rico. My pronouns are she, her. Happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. Thanks to everybody who's watching. So we're going to get started. What we'll do first is Dr. Rose and Mr. Klaus will present some slides regarding tips and tricks to offer during your interview. Then we'll move into the first mock interview, and then we'll do a feedback session, and then we'll repeat that with the second student. We'll also have a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section, not in the chat, but in the Q&A section, so we can make sure to address those during our Q&A session. So I'll go ahead and get started with Dr. Rose, if you could talk to us about your interview tips.
Certainly. Good afternoon again, everyone. As I mentioned before, my name is Dr. Rose, Associate Dean for Student Affairs here at Howard University College of Medicine. Over the next couple of minutes, I just want to share with you some of a few personal thoughts on interviewing. First and foremost, you must know your application inside out. I think this is your presentation to the admissions office, and it is what most interviewers will use to frame many of their questions. Now, I must tell you, while I've adopted a personal policy of not looking at the applications very much before the interview, to sort of blind myself to the interview application, I would say most of my admissions interviewers would review your application in depth before the interview process. So you want to be able to expand on the activities that you outlined in your application and be able to show how all of these activities and experiences tie into the traits of being a great physician. You want to know your research extremely well. Even if your role was limited, you should be able to describe your research project, the outcome, and most importantly, its significance. Now, there are a number of resources out there, including information provided by the AAMC that you can review about commonly asked interview questions, and you should definitely do so. But remember that most interviewers know that you are properly prepared for the interview and will do their best to ask you questions to take you off of your scripted answers. That being said, you should definitely have a prepared answer for why do you want to be a physician. That answer should not be too short, but it certainly should not take up 15 minutes of the interview. Many interviewers now include what we call situational questions, essentially asking you what you would do if placed in a particular situation. There are typically no right or wrong answers, but you want to be able to always explain the answer that you gave. Be aware of questions that attempt to gauge how you would respond when placed in an ethical dilemma. When answering these questions, I would suggest that you use what you know as right versus wrong, and always keep the best interest of the patient in mind when answering these questions. Next slide, please. Always be able to give examples that show your positive traits that correlate with being an excellent physician, such as leadership, communication skills, teamwork, and compassion, to list a few. If asked about any poor academics in the past, be succinct. Make no excuses. For example, don't blame a poor professor on your poor grades. Obviously, if there was something significant that happened outside of the academic world, obviously you can explain those things, but you never want to make too many excuses about poor performances, and definitely be able to say, this is what I learned from the experience and what changes you made going forward. Please don't make your first medical interview the first time you experience being interviewed. It is important that you put yourself in that setting and get used to hearing yourself explain your application and why you want to be a physician, and in particular, to be at that institution. This kind of blends into my next bullet point, which is to ensure that you familiarize yourself with the school that you're interviewing, knowing their mission and knowing how you would be a good fit for their medical school. If you have examples in your application that fit their mission, you want to use them. Next slide, please. While some of these things may seem obvious, as interviewers, we still sometimes encounter students or applicants who don't look very professional with respect to dress. Jacket and ties for the men, dress professional for the women. And during the interview, you want to maintain very good eye contact, smile, listen carefully to the questions, and try to take some cues from your interview as to whether you're talking too much or too little. For example, if the interviewer has to cut you off numerous times to get a question in, you're probably talking a little too much. If you've got a question that you were not fully prepared for, it's definitely okay to ask for clarification or a little bit of time to think about the answer. Next slide, please. Just a little bit about the virtual interview setup. So you want to make sure that you have a stable internet. You want to find a quiet space. I would definitely avoid dorm rooms with unmade beds in the background. And obviously I'm throwing these things out because we've seen this during our interview cycle. Make sure that you charge your computer and you have a phone as a backup. The lighting should come from the front, and as any lighting that comes in from the side or back tends to leave shadows or dark areas on your face. Make sure that you know where your camera is on your device and avoid any distracting backgrounds. Turn off your cell phone, maintain good eye contact, which means knowing where your camera is on your device. And if that program that you're interviewing at uses some software that you're unfamiliar with, make sure that you get in contact with them, that you have the software loaded on your device and you have an opportunity to practice with it beforehand. Last slide, please. Just a few final thoughts. You've made it to the interview, which means you've probably passed over several major hurdles, and that program hopefully is truly interested that you're going to be a viable member for their medical school class. So just put your best foot forward, as this is your opportunity and your moment to shine. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well,
Thank you so
for
much,
that.
Dr. Rose. I appreciate it. And now we'll have Keith Klaus move on to his slides. Excuse me.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate what you had to say, Dr. Rose, and I'll just try to build on that a little bit. But I think we're going to be fairly similar in the strategies that we have. We are the real difference for us, I would say, when we're coming from it and when I'm talking to students is we have a blind process. So for us, we have not read your application for the interview. So it allows for you to really understand your application in depth, but know that all of those things are on board for us to discuss. And you're not being repetitive or overly repetitive. It's fair game in this conversation. And so the big points I want to try to make are about being present and showing engagement. I think that's really important. And I know Dr. Rose talked a lot, hit on some of these things as well, but have some questions ready for this virtual interview cycle. Sometimes there's some give and take early on, specifically as there's presentations. be mindful of who's providing the presentation. Just as Dr. Rose mentioned, really understand the mission going into the interview day so that you might have some questions to find that fit, that mission alignment. I think that's really important as you're preparing. So depth in understanding yourself, depth in understanding the institutions that you're interviewing with, and then try to go deep in the reflection, the personal reflection. So it's one thing to have the experiences and understand the experiences that you've gone through, but it's another to show how you grew and developed through those experiences. Maybe what those experiences did to you more than what you did in the experience. You can have a healthy balance there. And I think that is key, that personal reflection. It shows a maturity level as you're entering this arena. Let's go ahead to the next one, please. Okay, this one, I want to talk a little bit about professionalism. I don't know that we do enough when it comes to coaching about professionalism. Now, Dr. Rose did a nice job saying you want to have lighting in place, have some redundancies in place for a technological issue, because many of these are going to be virtual again, the interviews this cycle. It seems there are a handful of colleagues throughout the nation that are doing in person, but predominantly what I'm seeing and hearing from my colleagues is that it will be virtual. So really understanding your presence in the virtual environment, you can still have your personality shine through, even though you're staring at a camera. But it does take some time to get comfortable with. So practicing, as Dr. Rose mentioned as well, is a very good idea. But again, professionalism means understand who you're speaking with, who the mission of those institutions, but moreover, using please and thank you, addressing people as doctor or Mr. or Miss. Sometimes we say Mrs., but you're making all kinds of assumptions. So maybe start with Miss until you're given a certain permission to call them otherwise. But it is a professional setting. In your Zoom interactions, in your emails, in any phone calls, it's always best to present yourself in a more professional way early, and then you can retract from that and go back from there as you get permissions in that setting. I think another thing about professionalism I want to briefly mention is your ability to deal with difficult news. Unfortunately, as a director of admissions, the vast majority of my answers to prospective students on do I get in is no. I have to give bad news more often than I get to give good news. And so in that, how are you going to respond? It's okay to feel hurt, to feel upset through that. Those are all very real, but allow some professional space to come in. It's okay to type that rant of an email you want to type and get back at the individual. How could you pass up on me? And then quickly delete that email, think on it, and then write again. These are just some things I wanted to bring forward from a professional sense that unfortunately over time, we're seeing more and more of this type of more aggressive behavior, and that's not conducive to you moving forward in the process. And admissions is kind of a small community. We all know each other, and so I just want you to be mindful of that. The last thing I really want to talk about is being authentic to who you are. I did mention mission alignment earlier, and the way to identify that is if you bring your real self to the environment in a professional way, but still they can get a true representation of who you are, which means you're going to have to be somewhat vulnerable and allow the admissions committee members who are interviewing you to get to know who you are as a person and as a future physician. Really, what is driving you to serve the communities that you aim to serve specifically as a physician. I know Dr. Rose also asked you to have kind of an answer for that question. Be prepared. You don't want it to be more robotic, so I wouldn't over practice, but I would say really have an understanding of what is pushing you towards serving as a physician, There's a lot of different ways you can serve and help others in the healthcare community. But what is it about being a physician specifically is something I would spend some time on. Okay. Thank you for your time.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Klaus. All right, we're going to move into our mock interview session. What I am going to ask is you are not the interviewer or the interviewee. If you wouldn't mind turning your video off. And our first mock interview will be with Dr. Rose and rising Dr. Rosa Frias.
All right, great. Good afternoon, Ms. Frias. How are you doing?
I am doing great, Dr. Rose. Thank you very much for this opportunity to meet with you.
Okay, just a few questions. Can you share with me an experience that let you know medicine was indeed the right decision for you?
Yeah, so reflecting on that, I would say that when I was working at the Massachusetts General Hospital, I found out this opportunity to shadow a radiation oncologist, which is the field that is one of the things that I'm interested in. And I remember being in the room with her, and we had a translator. There was a patient that she was a Latina cancer survivor, breast cancer to be specific. And she was, as soon as we walk in, the doctor introduced me and said that, oh, she's from Colombia. And I believe that she was from the Dominican Republic. So we just had that moment of, I saw like her eyes like light up, knowing that perhaps like someone actually understood her directly and that I could talk with her. And as we went on, the doctor would be looking at her, but she was actually looking at me most of the time. She seemed like very proud of telling us that indeed her cancer was not coming back. And that to me, I feel like that moment, the whole environment of feeling, I know obviously is a success story at that point, but just overall that moment of being there with her and knowing that as a Latina immigrant myself, and as someone that lost a parent due to cancer earlier on, I could see that this was truly something that I wanted to do, and it's a moment that I have cherished ever since.
Thank you. Can you share with me a personal characteristic that you feel needs some improvement to achieve your goal of being a great physician?
Yes, that's a very good question. So I think probably something that I need to work on and that I've been trying to do so is delegating, which I believe is very crucial because as future physicians, of course, there's a certain level of leadership that is expecting on us, but also with that leadership comes being able to delegate tasks and following up promptly, and also recognizing the best in each of your team members. So whenever I've had opportunities to work on a team, I acknowledge that sometimes I'm very proactive and I just want to do it all. But obviously it's not realistic to, when you are in a team, to be wanting to do it all the time, and it's also not like very team oriented. So I have done my best to really just see how I can contribute, but also give other people the space they need so that they can work their tasks in their own time frame.
Okay. Can you describe any challenges that you may have encountered during your college, whether it was an academic or non-academic challenge, and how did you go about resolving the issue?
Yeah, of course. So to provide some background, I initially went to a community college in Brooklyn, and then I got a scholarship that allowed me to transfer to a four-year institution, Mount Holyoke College in Massachusetts. It was the first time that I was getting out of New York. So that was a challenge on itself. But then I remember one of my first classes, general chemistry 1. I studied a lot for the exam, and when I got it back, I actually got I think it was a 59 or a 60. And that was definitely not what I was expecting. So part of me was completely devastated, considering this was one of my first exams, first classes. And obviously there's the question of like, am I going to be able to do this? This is literally the first exam I take, and this is the result. So obviously I went through my period of like, oh, I don't know what's going on. But then obviously I'm like, I am here, and not just to get everything right, but to learn in this process. And I feel like this opportunity is providing me with that space to learn and to adjust and figure out what is it that I am doing wrong, or what is it that I can improve, basically, to look at it from a positive standpoint. So I made an appointment with my professor, and we discussed a little bit of how I was studying. So she said, well, it seems like you're doing most of the right things. But then I also realized that maybe one of the things that I could improve on, or that I could expand on, was having like a study buddy, someone that would help me accountable, but beyond that would help me review concepts. So from that point on, I met my best friend up to this day, and we will go to the library like on a weekly basis, and then draw out all the concepts and then teach one another. And I feel like that was one thing that I realized, that it's not just like you sitting alone in a room, kind of like processing the material, but also I feel like you know what you know when you are actually able to explain it to someone else. And I feel like it was one of those moments that allowed me to learn that. And along with that, I also started like just recording the lectures and rewriting my notes, and just trying to expose myself to the material from different standpoints. And luckily, I was able to do much better. I ended up with an A- in the class. That to me was such a huge accomplishment, because I never thought that that was possible. So I am grateful for that experience to actually improve on my study methods all the way from the beginning, so that I could have positive outcomes or a better idea of how to approach exams from there on.
Great. What does the word altruism mean to you? And can you share an example where you demonstrated this characteristic?
Yeah. So I would say that to me, altruism is the ability of do things for other people without not necessarily expecting anything back. It's like that selfless act that you just want to kind of like, for me personally, it is very tied with like the notion of giving back. I've had a lot of mentors throughout my career that have helped me to different stages, and that is basically what the word embodies for me. One of the things that, to answer your question about the example, is I got to participate in this program called Teach the World Online, and it was started by an English teacher that he set up kind of like remote connections with teachers in other parts of the world. And I met online with him, show my interest that I wanted to do this. And I was able to actually say, well, you're from Colombia, right? So we actually have a program set up in Colombia, and there's a new site that we just started. So he actually put me in contact with them, and I would teach them English on a weekly basis, just like an hour or so. I think I did it for like 6 months in the end. And to me, that experience, I wasn't necessarily getting anything back in terms of like a certificate or anything in the end, but it was just that I understood what it was to learn English in Colombia, because especially when you come from impoverished, like a impoverished background, or areas that are not so well at teaching other languages. And I knew the struggle, and I wanted the students to genuinely see that it is possible to learn it, and that I could help them kind of like tweak around and teach them so that they could keep on improving. And it was very satisfying just to see when they would like understand something and kind of like develop that bond and that connection with them. That was something that to me was I really enjoyed doing it. And even up to this day, I'm still friends with some of them on Facebook and Instagram, and we talk from time to time. So it's something that I think embodies that concept.
Thank you. Can you share with us an activity that you feel really shows off your leadership skills?
Okay, yes. So when I was working as a research technician in Boston, obviously that was a job that required me to work as part of a team. But also when I first started at that job, I was fresh out of college, and I only had 1 summer of experience of research. Luckily, I was able to get the job. But then right on, I was put on a project that was working on the revisions of the highest impact paper for the Journal of Science. And I was the lead. I ended up being the lead research technician in that team. And to me, initially, that was definitely overwhelming because I felt that I didn't really have the experience, but it was also an opportunity to rise to the occasion. So they trusted me, and I trusted them in the process. So I felt that I was able to use my leadership skills because I had to organize my time. I had to have very precise idea of how long the experiments would take and when did we need them by. But before that, like, when is it that the whole team, including the PI of the lab and all the other investigators involved, had to meet to discuss the data and see if this was indeed going to get us to have that revision done in the timeline that was set up. And if eventually we were able to submit all the experiments together. But at some point, there was a point that I had to be basically running a lot of Western blots at the same time. And it was one moment that I realized, like, I need some help on this side. And so knowing and standing up for myself and being like, I am doing my best, but I feel like it would really benefit if someone can just help me with this part. And I was able to also get that help. And I feel like it was the combination of all of these, kind of like taking the lead and speaking up for myself, that I eventually led for the publication to be accepted, including the revisions. And I felt that is something that showcased my leadership and also my team working skills.
Great. And finally, can you just summarize in maybe 1 or 2 sentences why you think you will be a great physician?
So if I had to summarize it in like 1 or 2 sentences, I would say that I would be a good physician, great physician, because I won't give up the same way I haven't given up coming all the way from Colombia, like learning English, going to community college, and just looking back through my whole process, there have been many challenges. And the same way I've encountered many challenges, my future patients just coming to my office might be a challenge on their own for them. And I feel that I have the empathy and the background and the understanding to really provide the best care for them possible, and also to empower them and educate them about their conditions and make them feel part of a team, as opposed to me just delivering what is it that they have to do. I feel like that is something that is one of the most important things for me as a future physician. And I think that it kind of embodies why I believe I will be a great physician.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you for your time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose, and for Rosa. Now we'll move into Dr. Rose providing some feedback on Rosa's interview. Go ahead, Dr. Rose.
So this would get an A+. It was a great performance, even though obviously she was prepared. The answers came out very natural. It was conversational. Our virtual setup is great. Lighting is good. I think she used great examples to illustrate the points that she made from the questions that I asked. If I was going to be hypercritical, maybe the answer that had to do with a challenge encountered in college might have been a little long-winded, but I'm just being a little hypercritical. But I thought it was just very well thought out in terms of the answers, and it came out very natural.
Thank you for that feedback.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. So we're going to move into our second mock interview with Mr. Klaus and Whitney. Please, if you are not interviewing or the interviewee, please stop your video and take it away.
Hello, Whitney. It's really nice to see you and meet you today.
Hello, it's wonderful to meet you as well.
All right, thank you. Well, let's walk through just a few questions that I have for you in the next few moments here. And we'll start with, why did you decide to choose medicine and not some other field that helps and serves others?
So part of the reason I chose medicine rather than the field of nursing or physical therapy was really because of the ability to combine research with medicine. I really want to work in the forefront of innovation and participate in both the current and future of medicine and its development. And so what I hope to be able to do is work as not only a physician in the clinic and through surgeries, but also be able to contribute to the field, to push it forward over time. And so that's one of the things that really interests me in medicine, particularly, is that a lot of our programs, our medical schools really combine those research initiatives with their medical practice.
Thank you for that. What character traits do you have that you believe will make you a successful physician, and maybe even how? Elaborate on how.
That's a great question. So I believe one of the first characteristics that I think will make me be able to succeed in this field is my determination. My mantra in life is truly productivity, and I push myself at every level to do the best that I can and keep moving forward. And so every task that I invest myself in, I bring it to a finish and I do the best that I can in those things. And so I know everybody discusses medical school as you're drinking information from a fire hydrant. It's like drinking water from a fire hydrant, and that can be really difficult. And I do think it takes the determination, the willpower to be able to learn the things you need to do to become a successful physician. And that skill, I think I have always had. I've always been someone who was able to succeed in school, but it took me a lot of hard work, and I recognize that. And I think that just made me want to succeed at this even more. I think another skill that I think will really help me is being inquisitive and my thirst for knowledge. And that is something that really drew me to research and being able to do research prior to applying for medical school. I believe this is a skill that not only do scientists need, but medical physicians need as well, because you need to be able to search for that needle in the haystack, to keep looking to find what is best for each of your patients.
Okay, thank you. Can you give an example of a challenging situation you have faced? What did you learn about yourself, and how did you cope through this situation?
Yeah, so that is a very good question. I know a lot of us face challenges throughout our times in graduate school and our years off. I particularly worked with a group in a laboratory where we did a lot of things together and we were part of a team. But one of my grandparents actually became ill during this time and was in the hospital nearby. And so I was traveling back and forth a lot. It was very strenuous on me. I was unable to really do all of the things that I needed to do or that I would normally do for my team at that time. And some of my teammates realized it and reached out to me, and we worked together to be able to ensure that we could get everything we needed to done, that for the time that I needed to take for my family, and I needed to step back. And, for me, family comes first. And I really went and was able to take care of those things and make up for those times and the coverage that they were able to provide for me later on. But I think that really taught me the importance of why we do work in teams. Why in medicine do we work as teams? It's so that we have support and we have help. And so that was a situation that was really challenging for me. And my teammates not only were helpful from the work aspect, but they were also a wonderful wellness support for me and being there and being encouraging and supportive.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Couple more questions here. What will you do if you're not accepted into medical school this year? Do you have an alternative career plan at all?
Yes, so I have thought about this. I know it's not everybody's destiny to be able to attend medical school, and there are a lot of other great careers out there. And so what I would like to do is, if I was not accepted into medical school this year, is hopefully try again in the future, but in the meantime, be able to work as a year-long research fellow at one of the institutions near me or in a city where I have some family. And I've talked with some of the faculty at those institutions and know that they do allow that to be able to be done. That would not only expose me to medical centers that have a robust research program, so you can be a part of the research and work as a year-long research fellow, but you can also learn and be a part of a lot of seminars and different things that involve medicine. So I think that would really help me grow as an applicant as well over the next year, if that was the case.
Okay, and last one. How's the pandemic impacted your desire to become a physician?
I think the pandemic, as for many of us, it's made me realize personally just the importance of medicine, the importance of a healthcare community that can communicate and work together, and just how precarious everything can be as well. And so I think it's really made my passion and want to become a physician and a physician researcher even stronger. I really want to be able to be a part of the future of medicine as we progress forward through this time. I've seen the amazing work that so many have done and the sacrifices so many have given over the past couple of years. And I think that just made me even feel more of a fire that I want to be there. I want to help than even before, because you want to be a part of helping others. And I think so many of us go into medicine for that reason. And so actually, while doing research this past year, I felt almost a little behind. I wanted to be there, to be able to help my fellow students and my fellow, friends who were on the front lines in various careers. And so that's kind of how I felt.
Mm-hmm. Well, Whitney, I appreciate your time and willingness to put yourself out there in this setting, and thanks so much. That's all the questions I have for you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and being willing to talk with me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Klaus. And thank you, Whitney. Now, Mr. Klaus, if you could provide some feedback to Whitney on her interview.
Sure, you bet. Well, I think you're demonstrating why you're an MS3. You've done some amazing things already. Your calm and confident demeanor really shines through. So thank you for putting yourself out there, not just an interview with me, but 1,000 people. And so I definitely appreciate that, and that your willingness to do so. I loved that some of your passion really started to shine through at the end, especially the question regarding the pandemic is where I started to feel more of who you were, and the passion behind medicine. I thought that you did a nice job in delivering more, explaining kind of why you were giving the answers. You didn't just give a cliche or a topical answer. You kind of went into depth and described why. And I think that's really important in this interview setting. To provide, kind of one point of feedback, I would say that the vast majority of the conversation surrounded research and putting research forward, which is extremely important. I don't want to negate that in any shape or form. But I think you can combine that with some compassion and empathy toward the people that you're doing the research for, is the only little piece that I would say. But I think here in this setting, we're trying to be a little, as Dr. Rose said, hypercritical. So I wanted to do that. But overall, my goodness, your presence is excellent. Your professionalism is excellent. And thanks so much again for putting yourself out there this way.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Klaus. Thank you again, Whitney. So now we're going to move into our Q&A. I do see that we have several questions, and I'm going to summarize some of them. I do ask that everyone start their video again, please. And that way we can have folks answer. So we have a lot of questions on resources to practice, especially for something like an MMI interview. Ms. Williams-Felks, would you like to respond to that, please?
Sorry, I heard the MMI, but could you just rephrase it again?
Sure. If you have any resources you would recommend to prepare for interviews, practice interviewing, and especially into if there's any resources to prepare for an MMI interview.
So yes, as far as preparing for interview, I really do feel that interviewers are not going to ask you a question that you're not capable of answering. This is your opportunity to market yourself. So I think knowing who you are, why you want to go into medicine, those are really the resources you need to make sure that you bring forward. Have that elevator speech, they say, ready to go, as far as being able to prepare for an interview. Make sure you know your application. So I know that there might have been a question where someone asked, should you have notes? I don't know if you necessarily need to have notes, but if there are some things about your experiences that you want to make sure you don't forget to mention, it wouldn't hurt to have that written on the side so that you can incorporate it into a question or into responding to a question from an interviewer. But I don't think you necessarily need to go out of your way. You should know your application best. As long as you wrote your application, you had those experiences and they're legitimate experiences, I think you should have no problems answering the questions. In regard to multiple mini interviews, my experience with that is usually they have they have questions already ready, and there are certain rooms that have a specific topic that they're going to address or specific technical standard that schools are trying to address in any given room. So I know that most colleges of medicine have their technical standards as to what they're looking for in applicants as far as their skill sets. So just, make sure that you're aware of what those things are. As Dr. Rose mentioned, make sure you do your homework on the mission of each university and how you fit into that mission of the university. So that multiple mini interviews, I think they do them differently from one university to the next. We do not offer MMIs at our institution, but you just be ready to use your analytical skills, your communication skills, and to share your experiences. And as Dr. Klaus said, just make sure that they can feel that passion that you exude for medicine. So that's my response.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So we do have some questions, and I'm lumping some of these together so we can get overarching topics. If an interviewee is asked where else they have applied, how should they answer that if they don't necessarily want to share that information? And what is the thought process? What is the possible thought process behind an interviewer asking that?
So I'll tackle that a little bit. I don't think it's may not be qualified as a legal question that should be asked. But if you do get that question, I think you can deflect it. You can talk about the region that you're interviewing in without specifically calling a school's particular name. And if you're being pressured and you want to throw one name out there that out of the many that you may have interviewed at, I think that's okay. But I don't really think that the admissions panels and so are going to get much from asking you those types of questions. So if you get it, I would try to deflect it. If you're not able to deflect it and they're pressuring, you can throw one school out there, but I think you can politely deflect those questions usually, as you should for any other questions that are really not in the domain of an interview. Any questions about your family plans or your political views or anything like that, all of those things, are not part of a medical school interview and can be and should be, those should definitely be deflected.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Rose. So we have several questions about interviewees sharing medical information, which could be something like delayed speech, a person living with a disability, neurodiversity, like autism. So are these things that should be disclosed during the interviews?
I can jump in on this one, and I think that there's going to be a number of varying ideas on this, to be honest. I think that you could consider how you want to use that information. How is that a real benefit to you becoming a physician and serving others as a physician? To me, it comes back to some of the slides I was talking about earlier about vulnerability and authenticity on who you are. However, as you speak to these things about you that make up who you are as a person, they are part of you. You just need to be mindful that you can have control of yourself too. Sometimes these topics can be rather emotional, and that you have some kind of control. It's okay to show passion, but you need to have an understanding that you're willing to share this information, and follow-up questions may come of that. But overall, I think it can be an extreme strength, because one, you have to remember that you didn't get into the interview by happenstance. I know that we all suffer from some imposter syndrome from time to time. Even the best of us still have this happen where we feel we don't belong, but you're in the interview because you do belong, because you've earned a spot in this interview, and it wasn't just happenstance. And so again, using your vulnerabilities as a strength moving forward, and how that's going to be additive to the healthcare community and your ability to serve our patients in really strong ways.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Mr. Klaus. We have some questions in regards to two things: asking the interviewer questions after they've been, after the interview, and also asking them to provide feedback live. What are your thoughts and feelings on that, Miss Williams-Fox?
You must have saw my smile. Okay, so I do think that so I'll start with the last one. Asking for feedback, I don't think is appropriate during the interview, because I think that's the whole purpose of the interview process, right? Is to gauge what kind of a student you're going to be. So I don't think that's a question that students should ask, and we do get that question frequently. But I do think you should have questions available to ask the interviewer regarding their program. Just maybe one or two questions, because I think that shows that you have an interest in their program, as well as that you've done some research to find out things about their program. So one is definitely a do, one is a don't. I'm not sure if all my other colleagues feel the same way.
If anyone else wants to offer an additional answer to that.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll say our format really doesn't lend a whole lot to that to happen. It's okay, but you need to focus on, like, I agree with what Miss Williams-Fox is saying, is have some prepared about the program. That makes some sense. But the two give and take with the interviewer themselves oftentimes can be off-putting. And so what we would suggest is that you're really realizing that the interview is about you and about the interviewer starting to understand who you are in relation to the mission of the institution that you're applying to or interviewing with. And so really trying to keep that professionalism at the forefront, that it really is your time to not necessarily showcase who you are, but it's that kind of relationship development. So that's hard for me to say, because I think asking questions also builds some rapport often. But again, just to re-emphasize, the questions should probably surround more programmatic questions about the institution itself, is what I would add.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Klaus. We have a question, Dr. Rose, regarding capturing the attention of an interviewer who is preoccupied or disinterested. Would you suggest they say something or do something in order to try to gain their interest and capture that?
That's an interesting one. I think in this day and age with the virtual interviews, certainly maybe changing your tone would probably be the easiest way to where there's a slight, rise in your tone, or the voice level might be the way to catch the person's attention if you think they're drifting away. I truly hope that we don't have too many interviewers out there who are drifting away during the interview process, but I guess it certainly can happen. But I think maybe a change in tone, or maybe interjecting a question themselves at that point, if they felt that the interview was either dragging a little bit, or the person was not showing as much interest in the interviewee, would be my thought. I hope it's never happened to me.
Thank you, Dr. Rose. I appreciate that. Mr. Klaus, we have a lot of questions about how long an interview usually is, how many people are in the room traditionally. Is it a panel, or is it one or two people? And is there time for a conversation, or is it just rapid fire question and answer?
Well, I think that's going to vary. It's a great question, and it's going to vary from the institution that you are interviewing with. Some of my colleagues throughout the nation here will have a panel, and it will be a half-hour long, and it will be very one-sided, where here's the questions, and then we're going to walk through these, and more that rapid fire that you're saying. On the other hand, specifically to our institution, it's a little bit different, where we're going to have multiple interviews one-on-one that are 10 minutes in duration. And you might be thinking, 10 minutes, how could you possibly get to know me in 10 minutes? But there's multiple instances of those. And so it's a one-on-one. There's very specific questions that are being asked to, again, draw out the mission of who you are as a person in alignment with the institution that you're going to or applying to. And so that mostly, though, I haven't seen too many instances where it's a real give and take. The vast majority of the settings that I've been exposed to are that rapid fire kind of questioning, but it can vary on the number of time and whether or not it's a panel. So I wish I could give you a one size fits all answer on that, but it's just simply not the case. Just keep that mindset that it is largely secondary essay questions. Interview questions are going to be related to mission, and really identifying those applicants that align with the mission.
At our institution, we conduct 30 to 40 minute individual interviews, either one or two, and they tend to be more conversations in terms of how our interviewers conduct them. And they're really just trying to get the applicant comfortable and to get, to dig deeper than just the scripted answers and maybe some of the superficial things that may be in the application, and just get into a little bit of a deeper conversation with that person.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Ms. Williams-Fox, I will ask you this question, but I think Rosa might also have some insight as to this as well. So how would someone go about a situation in which the interviewer asks something that you do not completely understand due to a language barrier?
So I think you can always ask them to rephrase the question. I'm not sure if that means, are you asking in the context of if the student is a second, English is not their first language, and the interviewer is dealing with understanding? Mm-hmm. I think our faculty, have asked students if they could just slow down, just take their time. Our students are very, on the flip side, we do have faculty members that also have accents where students may have some issues with understanding questions that are asked of them as well. And in a situation like that, I would say that you could just politely ask them just to slow down just a little, as your ears eventually get fine-tuned to that accent, because it will take a few minutes to kind of get adjusted to the accent that you're presented with. It's a little bit of a tricky question, but I think there is a nice way to just ask them to repeat the question, and to just, if they could rephrase it in a different way, that may be helpful.
Fantastic. Rosa, did you want to offer any insight?
Yeah, just to add quickly on that, another way is you can tell the interviewer your understanding of the question. So you might say, so if I understand correctly, what you're asking me is this, to make sure that you're both like in understanding. And then maybe if it's not it, then they can clarify for you. That's another way.
It's a great approach.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have some more questions. We actually have 137 questions in the queue, but some of the repeated ones are, there are several times where applicants may be asked why they're interested in medicine in the interview, in their application, secondary, etc. How can they respond to this and come off genuine instead of being redundant or cliche? Dr. Rose, please.
Yeah, I think that you have to tell your own story, and it's going to be different. So for example, in the mock interview that I did with Rosa, she talked about an experience that she had at Mass General that was very specific, that had an impact on her decision. And it may not be like that for everyone, right? Some students come to us and they have had a series of experiences that kind of led them to this point. And that's totally fine. I think they have to tell their own story. There's no need to try to fit into one particular mold for that answer. I think you have to kind of dig deep and say, why do I really want to do this? And kind of put that out there in a succinct paragraph. And it may be different for folks. Sometimes it's a personal illness, a personal injury. It was something related to a family member. We see that very commonly that they were exposed to, or just observing what was going on within their community. That sort of drove them down that path, and then the various experiences that they encountered that kind of cemented for them that this was the right thing. So I think try not to be too scripted. Really ask yourself that question, write down a few bullet points as to what those things are, and then start trying to formulate a paragraph that really answers the question.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Rose. And for our final question, I want to ask, what should interviewees do after the interview? Should there be a thank you note? Should there not be a thank you note? Email versus written, etc. What are things that you would suggest? And I will also open that to Mr. Klaus and Ms. Williams-Falks.
We get all kinds. I think in these days digitally, a thank you email is perfectly fine. We still occasionally get some handwritten cards, which are fine. We place them in the file. We try to let students know that it doesn't make necessarily a huge impact one way or the other, but I think it's still appreciated, and it shows interest. So a thank you email, I think, works for me personally.
Sure, I'll piggyback on what Dr. Rose has to say here, and I love that Miss Williams folks pointing up to her thank you notes. I noticed that. Yeah, I think it needs to, and this is the words you've heard me say many times already. So if it's authentic to who you are, to say thank you, that you're not just trying to do the same thing to every single institution. If you feel moved to say thank you, to say I was impressed or not with the interview day, then do that. But with the understanding that it's not necessarily going to sway a decision of an admissions committee. It's not part of that, honestly. For our institution, we're going to hold all of those until we've made all of our offers. And at the end of the cycle, boom, they get flooded with all of this wonderful feedback, but it's not part of the decision-making process. I want that to be clear. But if it is something that you authentically just want to say thank you, by all means, do it.
Fantastic. And on that note, we are done for this session. I want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today, especially our students for being put on the spot again and having to do medical school interviews again. So we really appreciate you. And thank you, Dr. Rose, Mr. Klaus, and Ms. Williams-Falks for joining us today and offering all of your insight and expertise on this. Very quickly, please make sure to go to the other live sessions today, including a day in the life of a medical student, timing your medical school application, and a journey to medical school for high school students. We also have a medical student lounge where you can speak with medical students directly, and all of these sessions are recorded and will be available on the VFairs platform, the same platform you logged in with your login from today. So again, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.